So I went back and watched our review of the HT-A9.
Oh,
And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I said the A9 was the type of product that would bring more people into home theater. And I still really believe that. And I think products like the Quad are going to continue to change how we think about home theater.
absolutely.
But boy, those old school purists, man, they are not going down without a fight. They're hanging on for dear life like the mom in La Brea trying not to be sucked into another dimension. And by the way, welcome to episode 11 of Unplugged.
Yeah.
Hopefully you caught a review of the Sony Quad home theater on Sunday. If you missed it, there's a link to it right below the video. And now we can get started. There's a lot to talk about.
I imagine there is.
Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of people that watched this one, so
Yeah.
I have a feeling there's a lot of questions.
Let's use that term watched very loosely.
True.
Okay, let's just get this one out of the way.
right.
Now, I chose this one from John because at least he watched the video. John Rambo 6990 says, I know you said that it succeeds its predecessor. The real question is, do I upgrade from the original to the Quad for $1,000? I doubt it, but do correct me if it is. Thanks.
If you don't think it's better or don't want it to be better or want the thing you have to be better, that's all fine. That's all fine. It's not my job to sell you a Sony Bravia theater quad. It's not my job. My job is to just tell you what it is, what it does, and who it might be for. If you're sitting here, dealing with inner turmoil over whether or not you believe or don't believe that it's better than maybe the Sony HT-A9 that you have before it, I don't know how to help you with that other than to say that it is different. Just visually so. Obviously, it's not a little canister. These are flat, flat speakers. These are three-way speakers now as opposed to two with the HT-A9. Yes, they use the same subwoofer. Okay, but these have different, Wi-Fi protocols, different, networks. If you have the HT-A9 and you've experienced dropouts or connectivity issues due to the more antiquated antennas in those, then yeah, you should probably upgrade, especially if when your HT-A9 has worked for you, it's made you happy, and you want more of that, you just want reliability, yeah, you should upgrade. You should, because the reliability is going to be better. The app experience this time around is better. But it's not like radically different in the user experience either. So it's not like you're going to have to learn how to ride an all-new bike, But beyond that, as far as is it really $1,000 better? Hold on a minute. We forget that the HT-A9 came out in 2020, 2021. And if you kind of adjust for inflation, if it came out today, the HT-A9 at its full retail back in the day, if it came out today, it'd be $2,200-ish. So now we're at $2,400-$2,500. That's only a 10 to 13% increase. That's not a 40% increase. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. I don't believe the HT-A9 could come out in 2024 $1,000 less than what the Bravia comes out today. I really don't like it when people use that argument either against us or against a product. It kind of is like, what does that have to do with anything? You know what I mean? So I digress.
Yeah, I totally agree. The question of whether anyone should spend, a certain, any money to change to a product that's similar to what they already have. That's very difficult for anyone else to answer. I don't know. We don't know we don't know your financial situation. We don't know your environment or your listening habits. All we can do is really tell you what our experience is. And like Andrew said, who we feel this product could be for, and giving you just the facts about it as best we can. But no one can tell you whether or not $1,000 is going to be justifiable, but you.
Right.
Now, Matthew Weeflin wants to know if you can go into more detail about the direct sound quality comparison between the old and the new, the quad and the A9?
Okay, so admittedly, it has been a minute since I've heard the HT-A9 system. That system did not make the journey from Austin to our new house. Sony needed it back. So I am going off of memory to a certain degree. I do have some measurements, but they're really only applicable to our Austin house. I think the new three-way design of the Bravia Theatre quad system is an improvement. I think it allows for a little bit more of an even response, one that has just a tad bit more mid-range linearity or neutrality compared to the HT-A9 system. I will say this, at least in the new room in comparison, the new speakers do appear to be a lot more linear, a lot less peaky throughout their response compared to the old ones. Obviously, the subwoofers are the same. So yeah, I don't know if I can say with all 100% certainty that there's a night and day sonic difference between the two, but I will say in terms of a usability and obviously a reliability standpoint, for most people, we didn't have dropouts at our old Austin house, but I think for most people, from a usability and reliability standpoint, not to mention flexibility standpoint, the new quad system is going to be that next step up.
You know, I agree with you. I mean, at the time when we reviewed the A9, that was such a new concept for me. I mean, I spent most of that review just being in awe of what those speakers were doing.
Me too.
But now that I've heard so many traditional speaker setups,
Okay.
I feel like I have a lot better understanding of just how great the quad and even the A9 really is, and how, like today, I'm very confident when I say that the quad is 100% comparable to traditional home theater setups with full Atmos.
Oh yeah.
And it really is that good.
Yeah.
And, you know, before anybody breaks a nail pounding out bangers like, you know, you don't know what you're talking about, or like, no way, this doesn't come close to real home theater.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, why do you care? This product was never going to be for you. It's
Yeah.
not like the quad's in your shopping cart. You're not buying this thing.
Move on.
I mean, just be real.
Yeah.
But another thing is, I'm willing to bet that you haven't heard the quad or the A9.
Or if I may interject real quick, if you have, maybe you've heard it in a retail environment, and that's not a place to judge a system like this, especially retail environment. Like, let's say it's just out in a kiosk at like a Best Buy with like 60-foot ceilings and rafters and all of the, you know, ambient noise and stuff. Like, you didn't hear anything.
Yeah, shocker. It sounded like crap. Back to me. I mean, my fans, we all know how excited you are about the new format. So here are the rest of my thoughts. You know, back to how I feel the quad is very comparable to other, you know, traditional home theaters.
Sure.
You know, like, not only do we have in-ceiling speakers in our home, and we have the ability to do, like, what is it, Andrew? Like a 7.2?
7.2.2 or a 5.2.4 presently.
Okay. So we've heard just about everything from the most simple and affordable to the most expensive and complicated home theaters.
Yeah.
And what the Sony 360 mapping can do with these 4 little speakers, it's as good as a lot of those. I promise you that. If you get yours and you don't feel the same, then I don't know where there's something else happening.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like either you're not setting it up right,
Or you're wanting to not be truthful with yourself.
Yeah, you're not quite ready to come to terms with advancements that have been made. And again, you know, back to the Bravia, you're just holding on. You know, you don't want to get sucked into a different timeline, because like I was jumping out of my seat when we were watching that new Ghostbusters movie. I mean, we used all of the 4 quads on stands. They're going to be linked below. You guys, there's a lot of information down there. They range from 22 inches tall to 26. And there were sounds that were happening all around us, even near our ceiling, which is higher than I think average ceiling heights.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, average ceiling height is probably somewhere between 8 and 9 feet, and ours are pushing 10 to 11.
Yeah. And the Phantom Center is awesome. It's super intelligible.
Yeah.
Even if you're seated off to the side and you're not sitting dead center.
Yeah, I saw that comment come up quite a bit where it's like, oh, the Phantom Center only works if you're in the middle. I'm like, I never sit in the middle. My area of the couch is the far left side. And dialogue, if there's an actor dead center of screen in a medium close-up talking, dialogue was coming from their mouth dead center of screen, even sitting off on the left side of a 3-seater sofa.
I don't think the fact that there isn't a center speaker is an issue. Again, I think if you feel very strongly about center speakers and being an absolutely necessary part of home theater, then again, I'm sorry, I have to go back to saying, like, you're just not, that's something you've learned and you're not willing to let go of, or maybe you just haven't had a good pair of front, left, and rights that do give you a decent center image.
Well, and the other thing to consider that people aren't considering is, because I've seen this comment, not even in this video, but just any home theater video where we always show our use of a Phantom Center. A lot of people like to say, oh, but the center and the subwoofer are the two most important speakers in any home theater because they get used the most. That's accurate, or that's not untrue. However, if you're Sony or any manufacturer and you are designing a system where you are not only controlling the number of speakers, but their processing and how the signal is dispersed and used between however many speakers you're choosing to design, you know this and you've taken this into account, and so you are doing what you know to be necessary to take that center channel information and route it properly to your system. It's not as if they designed 4 speakers and a little control box and put it on sale and then suddenly went, you mean we forgot the center? Like, that didn't happen. They are accounting for it. And this might trip some people out and maybe make this conversation worse rather than better. But understand that they may be using all 4 speakers in some way, shape, or form to create the Phantom Center. It may not always just be a right or left thing with a stereo image to do it the old school way. They may actually be using all 4 speakers and phase and delay and all of this stuff to really truly bring that sound to the middle. And the reason I say that is because in the app, not only do you have different flavors of surround mixing and virtualization, like I point out in the review, but that height of center image adjustment is noticeable and very different depending on how you set it. And the only way that's possible is by using all the drivers in all 4 speakers to create that sensation. So in a weird way, it's possible that, you don't have a dedicated center that you get to stare at and be like, that's my center. You might actually have kind of like 4 speakers creating a center, let alone, I mean, at a minimum, you've got 2. And anyone that's experienced a quality Phantom Center before, it becomes very difficult unless you have a center speaker behind like an acoustically perforated screen so you never see it. I'm sorry, I still err on the side of dialogue to me, always sounds better, more natural, and more like it's coming from the screen when I'm using a Phantom Center versus when we have a dedicated center down below the screen. Admittedly, having a dedicated center sometimes can improve intelligibility because it's so directional, and that can help Kristi, but in terms of just naturalness and organicness, nothing beats a Phantom Center.
I 100% agree with you. There's only been a few, maybe not even a few, a couple of dedicated center channels that I really felt really elevated the experience.
Yeah.
I want to bring up intelligibility. You kind of just touched on that.
Okay.
Because that's really important to me.
Yeah.
Andrew mentioned the show The Gentleman in his review and how hard dialogue was to discern at time. Like the whole time.
For you, the whole time.
The whole time. Oh my gosh. We watched most of that season on the SVS Titans, and I always needed the subtitles on. But as soon as we switched to the quad, even I could understand their mumbling. So the Sony TV as a center still isn't good.
No.
Maybe it's better with some TVs. I have seen a few people in the comments speak on that topic, especially related to the A9. And I know we spoke to another reviewer fairly recently that said the same thing, like their experience using a different Sony TV
Sony OLED,
was,
likely better.
but I think the intelligibility is very, very good, both with and without the,
Voice
what's
Zoom?
it called? Yeah.
Voice Zoom? Voice Zoom.
I think I liked the Gentleman best with the voice zoom on, but I didn't need it for every piece of content we watched.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes voice zoom was nice. Sometimes it is a little bit too much. We were watching the Daniel Tosh Show podcast, and we had voice zoom on, and that is the crispiest dialogue I've ever heard. I was like, wow, that's hitting me right there. Turn off voice zoom. It's fine. It's fine. So the nice thing is it's just a button. I don't personally like the on off. Like I say in the review, I would have loved like low, medium, and high. But it's so easy to it's on the little remote too. You just hit it and it's on and off. It's almost instantaneous. So I will say this though, voice zoom does help low volume intelligibility. It's almost, I know some of you old school hi-fi guys, it's almost like a loudness button, almost, in that because it boosts the treble when you're at lower volumes, you get more of that intelligibility out of the system. So keep that in mind too.
Okay, shifting gears.
Okay.
I want to quote you, Andrew.
Oh.
Yes. A quote from your A9 review.
Okay.
You pointed out that Sony made some pretty bold claims with the A9, especially when it comes to the setup. In almost every press image, you said that the A9 you will see the 4 speakers thrown about the living room, not so traditional home theater setup. The contrast between that particular review and the quads has triggered some concerns about placement.
Okay.
For example, Dana B says, it seems like Sony is walking back the, quote, set the speakers anywhere and let spatial mapping do the rest philosophy a bit here, requiring the subwoofer to be critically placed relative to the room and the rear speakers to be behind the listener.
As with anything, like spatial mapping is amazing. It really is. Virtualization of speaker channels in general, whether it's Sony, Dolby, or DTS, whomever, it's kind of incredible. But good speaker placement, and I'm not saying like proper speaker placement, but good speaker placement is always going to be important to get the most out of this kind of DSP digital trickery. And so I don't think that they're walking it back. I found the new Bravia system to be very flexible. Now, when it comes to subwoofers, look, that's just like physics, like subwoofers. There's so many people like in the comments, and not just in this video, but just any video where we talk about bass, or if I mention this kind of subwoofer we use, they'll jump in there and be like, I found it to be completely underwhelming and Andrew's full of crap. What do you think is more plausible? That a product has gone on sale, has sold hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of units, has tons of accolades. Are all of those people in on the scam, and you're the one person that sees the truth? Or is it just equally possible that where you've placed the sub in your room or where you sit in relation to the sub in the room are counterbalancing one another? I.e., you're sitting in a null or your subwoofer's in a null. Because I have run into this my entire career where people are like, I need more subwoofers. And it's like, you need more subwoofers if you're trying to, evenly disperse the bass around an entire room. Now, in this case, you only get the one, and it's not even included, but you can only use the one. And that's its own critique. But when you only have the single subwoofer, yes, placement is always going to matter. And no amount of whiz-bang anything is going to do anything to combat bad placement. Because the only thing you can do, let's say you have your sub placed in a room, in a null, where it's sucking like 6 dB of bass out of the response where you're seated. The only thing you can do is juice the sub like plus 6 dB, but when you do that, you run into a possibility where you're going to clip the subwoofer amp. You're going to burn it out. You're going to wreck something. That's why I say, like, hey, if you're feeling like this just isn't quite working out for you, move your sub, or just stand up from where you are and walk around your room while whatever was playing that was not so inspiring. Just walk around the room. I guarantee you will find a couple of spots as you walk around the room where you're like, oh crap, there's a lot of bass right now. And mark that spot and put your subwoofer there. Experiment. We're too quick to write something off thinking we know everything when it can be something as simple as just moving your subwoofer or your seating position like a foot. And I mean it, like a literal foot. So yeah. What was the question? What was the original question?
I mean, I think you've
Did I answer it?
I think you've answered it. There were several placement-related questions that I'm just going to rattle off here.
Okay, yeah.
And hopefully you can,
I'll do it real quick, yeah.
Joao.
Okay.
Hope I said that right, sir. Says, hello. What about multiple listening positions? How well does the calibration handle that?
Mm-hmm.
At fake KLG, who's pretty much a regular, says, how flexible is the placement of the front and back satellites?
Okay.
Cairo Millar, what's your recommended rear speaker location for these speakers?
Mm-hmm.
Finally, at Chris Tucker 9179, says we can only place the rear speakers very close behind the sofa. Is it possible to adjust the rear speakers to be significantly quieter than the fronts?
Mm-hmm.
Or will the measurements? This person says measurements, but I think he means
The calibration.
The calibration do
Yeah.
that.
So
I'm sorry. There is one more.
Okay.
At Badger DMS, how much do you think wall mounting the front speakers will compromise sound?
Okay. I don't think wall mounting any of the speakers is going to compromise the sound because the speaker has clearly been designed for wall mounting. They include the wall mount brackets in the box and all of the hardware. So I don't think anyone should have to worry about wall versus freestanding, number one. Number two, if your speakers are very close to your sofa on the back wall, run the calibration. The calibration isn't necessarily going to lessen them in volume. It will match them to the other speakers. But then once the calibration is run, you do have some adjustability of the rear speakers. And so you would do that after you run the calibration. As for just general placement, these are very flexible. These are very flexible. As I just said, good placement is always going to give you better results with these types of virtualizations, but to say that you absolutely have to adhere to, absolute perfect, I don't think that's the case because I tried the rears directly straight behind, kind of almost in a parallel line with the fronts. I tried them a little bit off to the side but behind, and I tried them to the side, and I felt the results were always phenomenal. One thing you have to keep in mind is if you're going to play with the rear placement, you always need to rerun the calibration.
So moving on.
Okay.
I kind of want to take this one myself.
All right.
Alan Smith says, this feels like a step towards third time is the charm for Sony. An included subwoofer, a few more inputs, and a pinch of user control. Then I think they've finally finished the product. And Alan, I do agree with you. I'm with you on the subwoofer. I'm a little surprised that Sony didn't come out with a new compact subwoofer to go and to match the quads. This to me is probably Sony's biggest miss. I think that they could have not only complemented the quad with a single matching subwoofer. I think this would make, especially it would make the increase of the price less of a sticking point, but coming out with one sub that's adjustable to work in a variety of rooms would really simplify the purchase process. But speaking of the sub, real quick,
Okay.
Pock asked, Is it only Sony subs that link? Is it possible to use a SVS or others, or can you daisy chain? You kind of just answered this, but
Yeah, no, it's just the SW3 or SW5 from Sony that will work or be compatible with this system, and that's fine. That is okay.
yeah, I mean, I think that maybe in the future you might see Sony opening up a line like this to be a little bit more flexible.
Yeah. Or you would hear Sony argue, that's what our receivers are for. You know? I don't know. I don't know. But
Yeah, it could go either way.
it could go either way.
But back to Alan's question, ask for your comment, ask for your comment about the lack of user controls and inputs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this doesn't really surprise me. Andrew, you may feel differently. First, I think Sony knows exactly who the audience is for the Quad and the A9. That's not to say that the audience can't or won't eventually grow, but knowing the traditional audiophile audience the way, at least that I feel like I do, I think it's pretty hard for any brand to capture the traditional audiophile with a more lifestyle-focused product. Because, and I'm just going to be frank with you,
Yeah.
most of the time, you can't tell that crowd anything. Case in point, at Spurs Dynasty 73-78 says, this is for noobs that don't know any better. I mean, they know everything. They've experienced everything, and you'll have to pry their systems out of their cold, dead hands.
Yeah.
The good thing about the Quad is it's very good at being a set it and forget it type of a product.
Oh, absolutely.
Inputs, again, I think Sony knows their audience. Someone with a plasma or a TV that needs an optical is probably not buying the Quad. Now, maybe, just maybe, if the narrative surrounding soundbars and other, oh my God, lifestyle products can change, or when the traditional audiophiles start to see their beloved real audiophile brands begin to adopt the tech that is seen here in the Quad.
Oh, it's happening.
I know it is.
It's happening.
I know it is, but they're not ready.
Oh no, they're singing the praises. No, trust me, it's happening, and they're singing the praises of certain brands. Like that's why I'm like, wait a minute, you were the guy not 2 years ago saying the exact opposite. Mass market advancements still. But if suddenly a little boutique brand wants to all of a sudden give you Dirac and bass management and some virtualization, that's what makes them real.
Oh, yeah.
They're looking out for me. And it's
Yeah.
like, they're playing catch up. All these mass market brands have had this for years. Why were they not looking out for it? They're there to screw me. Okay. I think I've said numerous times, I definitely didn't say it in the Sony video, but I've said numerous times, more tech, R&D, and money is being thrown into developing, designing, and figuring out products like the Quad for consumers than anything else. And so while maybe the Quad won't beat a Bowers & Wilkins 800 home theater or a KEF R11 theater right now, when I said that in the line that Christy and I wrote for the script, it's like, it's coming. It's coming. And it's best not to just stick your head in the sand and deny reality. It's coming.
But speaking of tech,
Okay.
at FrickDude824,
All right.
yeah, love the username. Ew. Land. Ew. LAN 100. Nothing in media tech these days should be less than LAN gig. And that's LAN, all caps, for anybody.
We're getting super
who's
nerdy.
Like, what is that?
Yeah.
So for you at FrickDude, I actually reached out to Sony and asked for a response to your specific comment. And this is what they said. As the Bravia Theater Quad only streams audio via its network connection, in other words, no video, a faster LAN, parentheses, Ethernet connection is not required. It will easily support the compatible high-res audio formats without needing a faster connection.
Well, there you go.
So there you go.
There you go.
Probably still not a good enough answer for
No,
you, Frick.
that won't help this argument at all, but it is an answer.
It is an answer.
Yeah.
And then there is a question about longevity, which I know is a concern for any product
Okay.
that requires app support and things like that. At David Miller says, do you believe Sony will still support the A9 with updates for a time? And again, I reached out to Sony for a response. And they said, our engineers are always collaborating with their counterparts at Sony Pictures, Sony Music, and our industry partners to stay on top of emerging trends and formats. We will always look for ways to improve the customer experience via updates. For example, the HTA9 received a feature and functionality update in the fall of 2023, 2 full years after its launch in 2021.
Keep in mind, there's this, I think when people talk about support, I do have a feeling there's a little nugget in the back of their heads where they go, the second firmware updates stop happening, like the system stops working. And that's not true. It's just that the system stops being updated, but the last best experience you've had will just be the experience you continue to have until you decide to part ways with the system.
Moving on to the last set of questions.
Okay.
You know, I know you already you addressed this in the review, but there still seems to be questions. I just went to look at the video right now while you were talking, and still same questions.
All right, hit me with it.
I'm going to go with J Mac. He says, I'd be very curious to hear your comparison of this all-in-one setup with Sony 360 versus your installed system with the end ceilings, 6 end ceilings, and a pair of bookshelves using a Sony receiver that has the 360 capability, not for tonal quality, but for Atmos and surround.
Oh, this one's
placement?
super easy. Super easy. In terms of surround sound and placement, believe it or not, in our room, the Bravia quad, or theater quad, is better. It's better. And the reason it is better is because there are just certain limitations that one has to accept when your Atmos and surround channels are all ceiling mounted. And I went into this knowing that. I went into it knowing it, and when I go to set up my system, I do my best to work around those limitations. Because this was a review, and these are 4 speakers that basically get put on furniture or stands, and they can be where surrounds are just not able to be in our everyday life because we have an open concept living room that opens up to a whole other side. I mean, the room I'm in right now is missing a wall. So properly mounted surrounds are not possible in our space. I knew that. I've been very upfront with all of you about that. But so when it comes to surround sound in placement, when using, say, Lumina 2s on a Sony 7000 ES in ceiling for Atmos and surrounds, the placement is very good. It's very good. But having 4 of the quads on stands, basically creating a little bit of a circle around the primary listening position, it's a little bit better. It is. It's a little bit better. The one area where I would say our overhead Atmos speakers have it is absolute 100% assuredness of that overhead sound field. I never saw or I never heard a gap as, you know, planes flew front to back overhead with the quad. But if you have higher ceilings, if you have a slightly different room than ours, it's possible you may hear a little bit of a gap, and that's where dedicated in-ceiling Atmos channels are always going to win. But all things being equal in our room, the quad in terms of spatial placement of surround elements, a little bit better.
I have one last question just to make sure that we've answered this as thoroughly as possible.
All right.
At CAD Home
Okay.
says, any thoughts on how it compares to Sony's AV Receivers 360 audio? Does the integrated known quantity of this allow a better mapping of audio versus the hodgepodge nature of receiver and speakers not picked by Sony make a better soundstage?
The way I look at it is this. If you have watched our videos, been on forums, read other reviews, and you hear people talking about Sony 360 spatial mapping, and this is something that you're like, man, I kind of want to experience that for myself, and you either have a home theater already with existing speakers or you don't. If you don't, and you want to experience it, this is the easiest, most cost-effective, all-inclusive way of doing it, and you will get exactly, or a high degree of exactly, the experience that I believe most people are trying to describe to you. If you have an existing home theater with proper speaker layout for a 5.1 or 5.1.2 or 7.1.2, and maybe you're on a Denon or whatever, and you want to try it, by all means, you need, go get a Sony receiver with 360 spatial mapping and give it a shot. The experience is comparable. It's obviously not going to be identical when using third-party speakers because every third-party speaker may react a little bit differently. Some may leave you underwhelmed. Some may make you wonder where it's been all your life, but that's the speaker, not Sony, okay? As far as just placement of sound and the virtualization that Sony is able to do, in my opinion, be it on the Bravia system or using their receivers, it's just different. And if you like it, it's going to be very hard to go back to anything else. If you don't like it and you're like, I'm a Dolby guy, then go be a Dolby guy. And that's fine. It really is. But yes, this is comparable to the receivers.
Okay.
All right.
I think we have thoroughly covered the crap out of the quad.
I think so too.
Right?
I think so too. I do.
I think this episode deserves some big ups. All right, smash that like button.
Smash the like button.
Smash it. Comment away about how amazing we are. Use our links because that helps us.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else.
Another great show in the books. So yeah, I got nothing else. I love this system. Check it out for yourself if you're interested. Until next time, we'll see you Sunday. Brand new video, totally different. We're going polar opposite, polar opposite of the Bravia. So till then, we'll see you guys Sunday and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.